I was wrong about doors. Hello everybody, and welcome to another video. As I sort of implied, this video is going to be a bit more serious, as we'll be discussing the state of doors as a game. Now, as I'm sure you are aware, I've already made 2 videos on this in the past. However, I've come to realize that doors isn't completely doomed as I originally thought, but it also still does need to be saved, and I want to discuss that today. It's no secret that Doors isn't as popular as it once was. In fact, if we just take a look at its average player count across the game's entire lifespan, it's only around 1/3 of what it used to be, with signs of continued decay as time progresses. I want to use this video to reflect on this situation, as well as my previous views about it, as well as some new ones. We have got a lot to discuss today, so with all of that being said, let's begin. Alright, so to start, I want to show you this graph. This documents the average player count Doors has experienced each day from its release to right now, and I've gone ahead and labeled which player count spikes correspond to which updates. As you can probably tell, the player count has definitely decreased over time, with the game's peak updates definitely being in the distant past. In fact, right now is currently the worst the game has ever performed, bringing in fewer players than even before the release of the Outdoors update, which is definitely saying something. Now, at face value, this doesn't look that good. I mean, with a few exceptions, it appears that each and every update just continues to perform worse than the previous ones. However, there are a few aspects of this graph which I actually neglected in previous videos that I want to discuss now. Aspects which give me hope that maybe Doors could experience a resurgence sometime in the future. As you can see, although Doors is currently at its worst, it has been in similar situations in the past and has rebounded just fine. The main example which comes to mind is the modifiers update. This was a major update which actually performed the worst out of all the major updates in the game's entire history, barely bringing the game a drastic increase of players. I remember that I didn't even bother to play this update when it first came out, and as you know, I'm the literal Doors guy. The modifiers update came out in a pretty large content drought period, and it didn't really help the game all too much. However, as you can see, Doors managed to recover just fine after the update came out, as more popular updates were released. As you probably know, the next major updates coming to Doors are the Rooms Overhaul and Floor 3. So given how this graph proves that a rebound from a drought period is definitely possible, it's likely it will happen again with these new updates. Now, I just want to say, I'm wrong in the sense that in previous videos, I was being a bit overdramatic with how bad this situation is. Yeah, sure, Doors is in the worst state it's been in its entire history. However, that doesn't mean it can not rebound when a new update comes out. Now, the fact that Doors performs well when updates come out is nothing new. What I want to focus on is how to improve its performance without extremely major updates, which are few and far between. And unfortunately, there only seems to be one answer to that problem. You see, in my previous video, I said I believed battle mode could be the solution to Doors' declining player count. After all, one of the biggest issues is how the game isn't replayable, so why not make it replayable by adding a replayable game mode? Battle mode worked in the short run. It kept the player count relatively stable during the duration of the takeover event. However, after the takeover event, nobody played it anymore, and now it sits as one of the most underutilized aspects of the entire game. This is quite saddening, as battle mode was very fun, but this response from the community does tell us one major thing. If content is going to be added, it should stick closely to the original Doors formula to remain relevant for an extended period of time. Now, this provides us with a paradoxical situation. Players seem to only play the well-established Doors gameplay loop for an extended period of time. However, that same loop isn't that replayable, so players will leave after a while. And that's what we are experiencing right now. This is an issue a lot of video games have to face, and there really is only one solution to it that fits the current landscape of Doors, and that is more frequent updates. The Doors formula at its core is not sustainable long term. It's very rare a gameplay formula is, so it needs updates to supplement that. Now, I kind of went into detail about this in a previous video, but I want to clarify that when I say Doors needs more frequent updates, I don't mean small ones like item skin drops, or extremely large ones such as to the scale of the Outdoors update. I'm referring to small updates that have actual gameplay related features such as rooms and entities. Now, right off the bat, this seems rather confusing and difficult to pull off. I mean, Doors has already greatly increased its rate of update releases since the game's debut, and with how long it takes to make updates even now, it's not really possible for more to be pushed out quicker, right? Well, that's where the idea is wrong, at least partially. Doors updates are well known for being absolutely massive, and that includes spreading beyond the scope of what they are themed around. For example, in addition to implementing the entirety of the outdoors subfloor in the Outdoors update, it also introduced a bunch of new rooms to the hotel. My proposal is for the developers to still provide the same amount of content as they always would in a major update. However, instead of it all being released at once, it is released through major and mini updates scattered throughout the year. Here's an example. It has been teased that alongside the room's overhaul update, Wade, an upcoming Mines entity, would also be added. Wade has nothing to do with the rooms. In fact, they are found in the most distant location from the rooms, the Mines, so it doesn't really make sense to add them in the room's overhaul update, as players wouldn't really focus on them as they'd rather play the new overhauled version of the subfloor rather than go through the entirety of the Mines just to find this one singular new entity. So instead, why not add Wade in a separate mini-update themed entirely around its addition? That way, the player count can still be boosted prior to the release of the Rooms update, and the introduction of a new entity serves as the perfect way for players to come back and experience the traditional Doors formula they like, albeit at a small scale. However, it still increases the player count. Additionally, I'm pretty sure excluding Wade from the Rooms overhaul update wouldn't really impact the update's player count too much, as, like I said, players would mainly play the update for the room's overhaul, not a random new Mines entity that has been implemented alongside it. By taking unrelated new features from upcoming major updates and releasing them just a little early, the same amount of content can be repurposed in a way to boost engagement without too much extensive effort on the developer's part. I genuinely don't see any downsides to using this method, so I definitely think it should be a route that is considered. In the end, I've been wrong about Doors. Although this game will make a resurgence in the next major update, it can also make a resurgence by simply releasing small-scale gameplay updates every now and then that repurpose unrelated content from upcoming major updates. Still, even with this, Doors is a game in decline, so I do feel at least some steps should be taken to counter that, and I have a pretty good feeling these mini-updates could be the key. I'd also like to mention that if mini-updates were to be implemented, they should be heavily advertised, probably through event notifications and trailers, which release well in advance before the actual update releases, as that way the most players are aware of the new additions. So, with all of that being said, let me know in the comments what you think about this whole situation, as well as what other ideas you have to counteract Doors' declining player count, as it's really sad to see my all-time favorite game in this sort of situation, especially with how much effort the developers are putting into it. And thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.